So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre's second Fireside Chat of 2022. Before I go any further, can I just ask that everyone please keeps their microphones on mute until we get to the Q&A a little bit later on. And I also just want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our MEC YouTube page afterwards. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country from where I'm speaking to you from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. And I'd encourage you to pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands that you're on too. So my name is Abby and I'll be hosting today's chat. I'm the events coordinator here at MEC, and on behalf of the team, including the teams from MAP and TRAM, thanks very much for coming along. So the way that today's session will work is that we'll have an interview with our guests for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions, taking us through till the end, which is at 1:30 p.m. So this is the second of our two Meet the Managers fireside chats this year. And they're an opportunity for us to all find out more and get to know the brilliant people who run the programmes within the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre at MAP, TRAM and Innovate Ed. So today I'm joined by Laxmi, I'm our Melbourne Accelerator Programme Manager, and Andrew, who is our Programme Manager at Translating Research at Melbourne, which is known as TRAM. So I'm really looking forward to spending some time exploring your backgrounds and diving into what you do, why you do what you do. So a big welcome to both of you. And we know that you're program managers now, but I'd love to just ask you both what you originally thought that your dream jobs would be. So Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, growing up, I always wanted to be an astronaut. So that was my big thing. I was really excited to be in space. I loved kind of engineering. I loved technology. I loved all those kind of cool things. So my goal was always to be an astronaut or a fighter pilot. But unfortunately, Mum never let me join the Air Force. She thought it was too dangerous for me. So I wasn't allowed to do that. So I had to quickly scrub that and change directions and ended up studying engineering instead. So a little bit of a different direction, unfortunately, but with the way things are going, fingers crossed I can go off and be a space tourist or something similar at some point in the near future.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, maybe that could actually come true one day for you. Who knows?
Fingers crossed.
And what about you, Laxmi?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I actually didn't know what I wanted to be. So I would always say, I want to make people happy. That was always, if people ask what you wanted to be. And I was always curious about things. So at one point in time, I thought, oh, I want to be an astronaut. At the other point, when there was a rave about, like, series around investigations and things like that, I thought I want to be a detective. Then I thought I wanted to study, biotechnology and be like a geneticist and, so many other things. So I was always influenced by what was happening around and wanted to sort of get into that career. It wasn't long until I realized that, you have to be focused on a particular thing, but I'm happy where I am. So no, I started without knowing where I wanted to be.
Oh, wow. So there's quite a few things that you wanted to do there. So, but at least hopefully you're meeting the dream and making people happy. I'd hope so anyway. And so can we just start off by kind of going through some introductory stuff? Can you talk us through your careers and how you found your pathways into your current roles, please? Andrew or Laxmi, how about you go first?
Sure. So as I was explaining, didn't know what I wanted to do. I came to Australia in 2005, enrolled in a course to do a legal degree or law degree. And I thought I was going to change the world. I was going to work with, really like the migrant and refugee and all of those areas. Around 2 weeks into the program, I couldn't cope. So then I landed up, doing bachelor's, about 6 months, bachelor's in social work, again, driven by the passion to make something good for people. Then realized that I could actually go and work in a community center because I would get totally emotionally absorbed with things that was happening around. And I just felt like that was not something that I wanted to do. And that's when I moved into accounting degree, which is great because it did help me to understand business and also understand especially my parents who wanted to start their own business. There were so many failures, and I just wanted to be like, let me learn, how business is done. So that's how I took up accounting. Plus, it also helped me get my PR, which was important at that point in time. And so I landed up working as an accountant for about 5 years. And every day it was very, very different to what I was as a person. I loved hanging out with people and really being around people, and accounting desk job was just not for me. And that's when I took a big pivot in my career, gave up everything I had built so far, and really got into startups and entrepreneurship space. And that's how I guess started my venture into working with startups. One of the key things that was really important all along the journey was to identify what I was really good at, which was being curious about things and people. And I think that curiosity led me into working with amazing founders these days. And that's how I landed up working at the MEC program. Prior to that, I worked at Startup Bootcamp, which is a global accelerator for startups from all around the globe. I also worked at impact investing space. So for some of you who might be new to this space, it's basically, funding for social enterprises and startups that are really moving things for our marginalized community and so on. So I was really excited to be in that space, and had the opportunity to work with some amazing founders there in India as well. So all in all, I had to sort of get myself out there working with founders before I could join MEC program, and started running the program since 2018. And over the years, I have had this immense opportunity to work with founders, but also really interesting people like Andrew, Abby, and all the other people that are supporting the founders. So that's been a great pleasure to be around in the startup space. That's my journey so far.
Wow, thank you. And what about, sorry, actually, just one more thing, Laxmi. You talked about getting your PR. So could you just tell everybody actually where you're originally from and where you grew up?
Sure. So I was actually born in Nepal, in a very remote village. So at that time, just getting a school degree was very difficult, I guess. And my parents made the right decision to move to the city. So I grew up in Kathmandu. I did my schooling in there. And then for my high school, which is like my college degree, I went to India, got really exposed to a lot of things happening in there. And if you compare to where I was born to where I had the opportunity, I could see that I guess it was the drive and the vision that my parents had for me, and that they entrusted me. And so when I came to Australia in 2005, like an 18-year-old girl with no network, no opportunity, no network, and no knowledge about what I was going to do. But it just was a dream that I'd someday call Australia home. And I've been here for the last 20 years or so, maybe 15 plus years. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. So huge leap, moving to a completely new city, let alone country, without knowing anybody. So yeah, fantastic. And what about you, Andrew?
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, so I actually studied engineering as my undergrad, and as my kind of big capstone project for that, I was fortunate enough to run the university's car racing team. So it was mechanical engineering. So for any Drive to Survive fans out there, I got to live my own little kind of Drive to Survive for a year, which was absolutely great fun. But doing that, I learned that I didn't want to be kind of involved with the design or the technical side of things. That didn't really that didn't spark joy for me. But I love the kind of team management side of stuff, and it was kind of really great to kind of see how to run the team and all the things around kind of the business management side of things. So really, really interested there. From there, I fell into a bit of an operational role in sports marketing, which was kind of a completely different direction. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, but really, really kind of fascinating to see how an entirely different world works. But I really love being kind of a technically minded person in a really non-technical industry, which was kind of really great that I could give different perspective and kind of add a bit of creativity to lots of the ways that we did things there. And whilst I was working through that company, I actually saw an ad on Facebook for the Masters of Entrepreneurship studied at the university. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. So I quite literally went and quit my job the next day and went back to study, which was an absolutely amazing experience. I think going back and doing it a little bit later in life, when I had a different perspective or different attitude towards study that I just probably didn't have when I was an 18-year-old in my undergrad. And through that, I was very close friends with a Belgian physiotherapist who was also studying with me, and we were looking for a great opportunity to get involved and work together. And we met some researchers at the university who were developing some robotics for upper limb rehabilitation for stroke survivors, which is a huge problem for the 1 in 6 of us who will suffer a stroke in our lifetime. So through them, we worked with them in building a startup out of that, which was called Recubit. And that was relatively successful in the sense of that a lot of the IP that was developed, we managed to license to a third-party company. And in wrapping up that adventure, I had this kind of great set of skills that I developed and experience that I developed through going through that journey. And I was fortunate enough to see an opening with the translating research team and help other people and help other researchers who are doing great things to go out and actually do great things with their research and go and have the impact that they want to have. Which is kind of what I get to do now every day, which I really love about my job.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's an interesting pathway, but yeah, thanks for sharing. So you've both had involvement in startups as founders. So Laxmi, can you talk us through what the Illume Foundation is? How did you come up with the concept?
Sure. So this is something that I encountered, right? Like in 2005, coming here all alone and not having networks, and so really not having mentors around. That really, I guess, if I had someone who would say, look, based on your skill set, you should actually be doing something that is much more people facing, even maybe sales or business development or so, rather than accounting, maybe I would have saved maybe 5 years of my time. It was a good experience, but I'm sure like that would have definitely cut short my career journey in terms of where I wanted to be. So that was one incident. So I always felt like there wasn't enough opportunity for international students in there. The other big moment came for me when I actually went to the US. So after I finished my MBA at MEC Graduate School of Management, I majored in entrepreneurship, and I was quite active in the students clubs around startups and entrepreneurship. And so I thought, like, what, I think I'm ready to go to the Silicon Valley and get into startups and venture capital. So very happy and bright. I went there and I stayed in LA because San Francisco was very expensive. And I realized that I didn't have network. It was such a close community, as some of you might already know, and that the things that I experienced back in 2005, arriving here in Australia, were the same, even if I went to the US in 2015 or 2014, right? So this whole problem around opportunities, especially around jobs for newly arrived immigrant or graduate, was always bugging me. And then I would get a lot of students, because I was working with some international students in here just out of my own, I guess, time that I was giving to them to mentor them. And a lot of the students would again and again say the same issues, even after 10 years, that they still had difficulty getting jobs in here. And also, just when you're traveling in a car, you will especially if you're using Uber and things like that, you will see that the people who are driving cars are so talented. They could actually be joining a database company or some sort of IT companies, but they're all doing like Deliveroo and Uber, and all of that is because of, again, no opportunity in there. So with this in mind, and the other side was this, a lot of startups, so they were like, we want to get talent, but there's such a big, huge talent war. We're not able to attract the right talent because at the same time, the bigger companies are taking are attractive for these students. So that really got me into thinking, like, what is the most viable way for us to help these graduates and also newly arrived migrants into job opportunities? So I started Illume Foundation with the premises that let's break this barrier of no experience, no job cycle. And how do we do that is through placements, through giving them their first gig here in Australia. And so far, we have over 40 students that have gone through the program since its launch in 2021. Even though the concept was there for a very long time, I finally gathered courage to launch that in 2021 during the pandemic. And out of the 40 students, we had about 30 students that actually got a job with the same companies or with other companies. It's really clearly indicating that if opportunities are available, talents are there, and so that's how we can hopefully, foster the economic activity in Australia and globally as well. So that's the aim behind Ilium Foundation.
Oh wow! Yeah, I wasn't aware of any of that. So that's really interesting to hear, actually. Yeah. So Andrew, you've already spoken about your startup, which was Recubit. So I guess gaining first-hand experience as founders must have helped you in your current roles as program managers. What would you say that some of the important learnings that you've taken with you are?
Yeah, great question. I think it's being able to speak from that lived experience is so valuable for when we're dealing with the researchers who, are at a point where they've got something cool, they've got something exciting. They don't know whether they want to go down the startup pathway. They might want to license their IP. They might just want to engage with industry more. So there's so many different options in front of them. So just being able to say, this is what I did. This is what I would do differently if I had my time again. This is what I learned through doing that process, and really helping them to be in the driver's seat as they're going through, I think is so important to making sure that they're owning their journey, they're owning the decisions that they're making, and that they feel in control. Because most of these journeys are going to be an absolute roller coaster of highs, of devastating lows, and it's really important that they can have control of their destiny in that sense. So being able to provide a bit of perspective from that sense, I think has been really valuable. But also recognizing, I think, where we didn't do so well and where we would have done things differently if we had our time again, I think is a really humbling way of kind of building rapport with a lot of the researchers, because this is an entirely new frontier for them, looking at the way that we can approach kind of research impact from this sense.
Brilliant. Over to you, Laxmi.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that comes to my mind with having founder experience and working with startups is empathy. Like, it really helps me to be empathetic to the founders that we are working with, because I've been in the journey myself. When they talk about like founder highs and lows, I understand that as well. We've seen so many stories about startup life and so on during the program, but having that lived experience means you can connect directly with founders. You also know like what is the shortest, quickest way to help them solve their problem. And I think that comes back to my initial start when thinking I want to make people happy. I think this is where like I really want to be able to help them, and hopefully by helping them that they are going to be happy as well. So the biggest learning for me has been around being empathetic towards founder and running programs from founder perspective, because at the end of the day, the path of entrepreneurship is really hard, and it's something that you're creating out of nowhere, or there's constant competitions, there's constant other 10,000 things that you could do, but you only need to focus on one thing. And all of those things, all of that capability to deal with them, and I guess that resilience to deal with ups and downs of that is something that I have learned by being a founder myself, but also seeing other founders go through and how they are solving that. And that's something that I want to be able to support more founders with.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I guess so. We've spoken about kind of your pre-program experience. I think quite an important thing to touch on is, could you actually tell us a little bit more about MEC and TRAM? What are the programs? What do they involve? That kind of thing. So Laxmi, do you want to go first?
Sure. So many of you in the room might already know about MEC program, but again, I'm going to repeat it. So Melbourne Accelerator Program, or MEC program, was started in 2012. So we started with 4 startups in 2012. Actually, out of the 4 startups, 1 startup is now exited with a really good number, and the other 2 startups are still operating, and I think 1 has exited as well. So we started with 4 startups in 2012 to actually now supporting about, I would say 50 startups across our 2 programs. So one is the Core Accelerator, which is the 5-month program, which is, by the way, we're recruiting for that program now. The application end this week. So definitely apply if you've been thinking about the MAP program. So in that 5-month program, we provide the mentorship support, $20,000 equity-free funding to support you in your journey. So that's the accelerator program. In addition to that, we also run pre-accelerator program called Velocity, which is for really early stage founders who are still thinking whether entrepreneurship is for them or not. They might be working in corporate environment and doing something on the side, or they could be students who might be working on something interesting. So that's a part-time program that happens every twice a year. And so I would highly encourage, especially if you are early on in your journey, to join program like Velocity program. So basically through 2 of these programs, we are supporting about 50 founders every year, which is really awesome because, from 4 startups to being able to support 50 founders means that we've got a large network of our alumni base. So I think we've supported over 250 startups so far. That's a really good, I would say, outcome and impact for institution like us who are here to really support the next generation of founders.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. And Andrew, do you want to talk about the TRAM side of things?
Absolutely. So TRAM in many ways is similar to MAP, but also in many ways very, very different. So we exist to help and support researchers to have the most amount of impact possible that they want to have with their research. So we run a series of different programs that are designed to really cover the entire spectrum of I'm a researcher and I've got something that might be cool, it might be of value, who can help me, what are my options, all the way up to researchers who have perhaps incorporated and have a fully functioning startup as well. So the 4 different programs that we run are really kind of designed to be, the early ones are about being as accessible as possible, getting as many people involved as we can. So I think the ones that we just ran, the bootcamp series we just ran recently, we had over 220 researchers participating. But what's really exciting for me is that we had researchers from every single faculty. If you go back 3 or 4 years, most of the researchers we worked with were engineering or MDHS and really STEM heavy. But we had all 10 faculties represented. We had 15 institutes from the biomedical precinct represented as well, which is fantastic. And we had 60% female attendance as well, which is really awesome to really kind of shift that paradigm of who's doing great things with research as well. So that's the kind of really early stage stuff. And as we go through, those 220 odd participants will perhaps turn into about 10 or 15 or so teams as we go through the later stage programs. And the end result of that, after going through all 4 programs, is we might have 5 or so fully functioning startups. So it just goes to demonstrate kind of how much engagement's needed for us to get that as an outcome at the other end, which is really, really exciting. So we've been around for about 6 years, and unfortunately we haven't had an exit just yet, but I'm sure there won't be one too far away. But there's probably around 10 or 12 or so fully functioning startups now that have been out there, within the TRAM program, raising lots of money and using their research for great, great things. So it's really important we can provide these sorts of services to support, the researchers doing great and then, doing great work and great research across the university.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for those overviews. So staying with you now, Andrew, you mentioned that you've had previous experience in events and marketing, and I believe that was with companies such as Nike and Red Bull. So as somebody that works in events, that sounds very exciting. Can you tell us what that was like, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of fell into a little bit of the sports marketing side of things, but I really loved it. I had so much fun whilst we were there. But I think there's a couple of things that I kind of took out of that experience that I still use today, working with researchers. And I think anyone here who's been involved in events at all just knows, whilst, in front of the curtain, everything looks great and everything looks, really smooth. Behind the curtain, it's always crazy. It's always hectic. And that kind of hectic living, moment to moment, that environment is in some ways is very similar to that startup journey as well. So being able to be, okay, being comfortable, operating off perhaps incomplete information, or just being, done is better than perfect, is kind of a great little mantra we love to say. It's very similar to the environment of kind of being in events. Obviously not the events that Abby runs. They're always fantastic and very smooth and never stressful for anyone. But the other thing that I think was really great is working with such kind of really strong brands is that side of storytelling. If I say Red Bull gives you, hopefully everyone's saying wings out loud. Everyone just knows those elements of what Nike, gives you as a brand. It's that athlete, it's that legendary, it's that going above and beyond. And I think the way that they talk about themselves, the way that they share their story is so important for our teams and our researchers to share their story, to share what they're doing and share the impact that they're wanting to have. because when we can share the story, we can bring other people along on that journey. And that's so important, whether it be from a funding perspective, whether it be from building the team out, whether it be from building allies or working with government or other peak bodies, whatever it might be. If we can share what our vision or story is, then it just really opens doors from that perspective. And looking at companies that have done that exceptionally well, I find is a great source of resource.
Wow, yeah. What amazing companies to have been involved in. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So Laxmi, you've actually had experience as a co-founder of Illume Interactive over in India. So even though that was a few years ago, could you tell us how the startup scene is different over there?
Sure. So when I started Illume Interactive back in around 2014, 15, the startup scenes in India were a lot more crazier than in Australia, and it was a lot more easier for us to actually also recruit talent. So it was one of the reasons why we set it up there as well. I guess one of the mistakes, or out of the many mistakes that we learned from, was trying to transition between a service-based company versus a startup as well. So initially we started Illume Interactive as a way to make our own games. So a couple of my co-founders were into gaming, so we thought it's a great opportunity, let's come together and set up a gaming studio. Later we realized that we need to have customers. We can't just build a business on passion. So as we were trying to get customers, the customers didn't want us to make games. They wanted us to make websites, and they wanted us to make numerous other things. So because we didn't have any money and we were bootstrapping, so we sort of thought about let's focus on serving our customers. And then as we were doing that, and as a startup, you have limited resources, and all your resources are now being used in just servicing clients. And then that really sidetracked us from the very thing that we wanted to create. And eventually we had to let go of our teams and, close down our startup in India. Even though the startup scenes in India were really booming, particularly in gaming technology back in there. If I look at it now, I mean, the startup scenes in India is even more bigger. I think it is, especially in Bangalore, that's where we were based in. It's one of the highest rated city in the world for startups, and there are so many unicorns that are coming out of it. And so eventually, when my career as a business founder did not succeed, I joined an impact investing firm in India, and that gave me exposure into lots of other startups that were playing in this space. And India is such a I guess a vibrant startup community, whether you're building a social enterprise or whether you're building like a tech firm like Byju's or Flipkart or Nykaa. There's a big, huge market opportunity within India itself. They don't even have to go out looking to be a billion-dollar business. They can do it in their own country. So if you look at it, I think there's a lot to learn from India, especially in impact investing space as well, because the firm that I was working with, they started impact investing in early 2000. They were one of the pioneers of impact investing. And again, impact investing is investing in social enterprises or investing in businesses that have a long-term outcome around social and environmental issues and so on. So they were doing that in early 2000s because the system was so broken in there that they needed to come up with startups and business ideas to fix the system. And so that was the pioneer in there. But if we look at it, the impact investing space in Australia itself is not that long ago, maybe about 10 years ago. So I would say there's, again, a lot to learn in that space as well from India. And these days we are seeing, especially there's a really good opportunity to engage with India and Australia with all the relationships happening. So there's a big opportunity, again, for Indian startups to come to Australia to set up their client base. In fact, many of the startups in India see Australia as a test bed before they go into other big markets like the UK and USA. And for Australian startups, it's actually a really good opportunity to set yourselves in India as well, because again, huge potential. The middle income earners in middle income bracket people have increased exponentially in India. So back in those days, you'd be like, oh, but the product that I'm trying to sell, we aren't going to make that kind of money in India. But I think things are definitely changing. So again, as a market also, India is a big potential. And as somewhere to learn about entrepreneurship, India is also a big potential as well. So that's why I'm really excited about this space.
Yeah, I can tell you're passionate. That's yeah, it's really interesting to hear. I wasn't sure how big the startup space was over there. So that's, yeah, amazing. So back to you, Andrew. So you've already touched on TRAM and what the program is. So you've been there for roughly 4 years. How have you seen the program like evolve and change over that time?
Yeah, absolutely great question. And it has changed a lot. And I think it's really interesting that we apply the processes and techniques that we teach and that we work through with our researchers around kind of understanding your customer, understanding the problem you're solving, and applying it to the situation that we're in. So just very quickly, the problem that we're trying to solve with TRAM is that globally, Australian researchers punch well above their weight. They do fantastic research. The problem is, though, in the Western world, when it comes to having impact with their research, we're dead last. Like, we're not bad, we are the bottom of the pile. So it's really important we can help support researchers in how they approach their research, start their research, think about their research, and give them room and space to dream, think, play, and explore all these things. If I go back to the beginning of my time, I think conceptually the easiest bridge to jump for a lot of these researchers is those in a STEM background. That's where a lot of our teams came from, was STEM heavy. And a lot of the things we spoke about were kind of commercialization. It was very money focused and very business focused in that sense. And for a lot of researchers, especially those that have come from from MDHS, or so with a medicine or health background, or perhaps from a HAS background, they're not getting into research to get rich. In fact, none of our researchers get into research to get rich. They get into research to help people. So we've had to kind of relearn the ways that we speak about research impact so that we can engage with researchers in a way that they're open to receiving and helping them understand kind of the pathways that are in front of them, and that commercialization isn't the goal, but commercialization is a vehicle that we can use to go and have impact with our research. And it's one of kind of many different options that they might have that's in front of them. The other way that we've changed and evolved and grown the program is really stretched that spectrum of where we're offering help. It used to be kind of very centralized, but we've managed to evolve programs that we can help researchers from an earlier stage and also support researchers longer through that journey as well. One of the difficult things that you'll often have to face as a researcher getting involved in a startup is licensing your IP from your host institute. And it's important that we can support researchers as they go through that process of negotiating with the university to get access to their IP and things like that. So really, we've grown that depth of how we speak to people and grown the breadth of who we're engaging with and how we're able to offer that support as well.
Yeah, fantastic. It sounds like you're really supporting and helping a lot of people with what you do. So yeah, great stuff. So Laxmi, diving into some of the other areas that you've been involved in within the university, I know you've had experience as a consultant in the innovation practice program. Could you tell us more about your passion for student entrepreneurship and the ways that you've been involved in that?
Sure, Abby. One of the reasons for working at the University of Melbourne was being able to see, these many talents and how do we actually train them into entrepreneurial thinking. So before that, I was involved in setting up the Talent Institute with Startup Bootcamp. So this was a flagship program of their Amsterdam program, which was about training graduates or students with startup skills and tools and mindset, so they could go and work in a startup as a growth hacker or digital marketer, right? So that's something that I had launched in here. And during that time, I really got exposed into like some of the nitty-gritty of working with students and some of the challenges that exist in really, getting into the university environment to help these students. So when I had the opportunity to get involved in the innovation practice program, which is part of Faculty of Engineering and IT. So basically, the students, it's a capstone subject. The students across the university get opportunity to work with industry projects, and most of those industry projects are again very much related with innovation and a bit of entrepreneurship in there. So natural to my knowledge that I had prior, working with those students around what that innovation process looks like, how to support them, how to mentor them, and also I guess in that similar way also to help the other mentors. So how the innovation practice program works is that they have a bunch of students, but there are also a bunch of industry people who may have or may not have experience on innovation working with the students. So really mentoring those industry sponsors or industry partners in innovation area as well. So that really got me excited about entrepreneurial thinking for our young graduates, but also for people who are already working in bigger organizations. So that's, I guess, my story of how I got engaged with the students. And that's also how it led me to design some of the programs that we do through Ilium Foundation that particularly touches on like entrepreneurial thinking. So with Ilium Foundation, as I briefly touched about, it's about connecting students with startups and businesses, but it's not just about connecting them, it's really preparing the students to work in those fast-paced environment. It requires a very different thinking. So, my experience working in the innovation practice program really helped me to look at how might we be able to design programs that are going to help students activate their entrepreneurial mindset to be able to be prepared to work in fast-paced startups or innovative environments.
Oh, wow, fantastic. So that's on the student side of things. I also just want to ask you about your passion for empowering diverse communities through entrepreneurship as well. So could you also just touch on how you actually achieve that as well, please?
Yeah, sure. As by now you would have, known that I'm quite passionate about entrepreneurship and especially in diverse communities. So I've been working with some founders on really helping them to navigate the startup ecosystem here in Australia. I mean, sometimes, I get calls from founders in Singapore or in India, and they are pretty much looking to come and set up their shop in here, or sometimes they just want to understand if they are based here in Melbourne or in Australia, look at like what sort of accelerator programs are useful to them. So I kind of like have, sort of my way of giving back is allocate some time in a week to speak to founders like that and to see like, maybe some are suitable for MEP program, maybe some are suitable for some other programs, which is not run by the University of Melbourne, but at least being able to show them that pathway, I think just helps them to short their journey. So I work with a lot of founders from that angle as well, which also really helps me to, I guess, engage with founders that may not be coming from the MEP program. The other thing is also I have launched a non-for-profit organization as well. In fact, we are currently in the form of setting up the structure, which is around, again, supporting the founders of marginalized and underrepresented communities more from a storytelling perspective. So basically what it does is it helps you to get your story out, because a lot of the media that we see, a lot of the media hype that we see are focused on founders that have succeeded in getting $50 million or raised a bunch of money from the VCs, but there are so many other founders and really exciting founders that are working on amazing ideas, but those stories are not being told, and those stories are the most fascinating and most inspiring especially for the next generation of founders or students and other people. So the non-for-profit that I'm setting up, which is called Founder Stories, is really being able to bring those stories on the platform and be able to support or inspire the next generation of startups. And so we're doing that with our immigrant and underrepresented communities, but it's open for everybody.
Wonderful. Yeah, great stuff. And Andrew, you have an entrepreneurial background, having completed the Master of Entrepreneurship over at Wade. So you did touch on that a little bit before, but you've also been a faculty member teaching into the Garage program for the MOE. Could you tell us what it was like having been a student and then also a teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I graduated my undergrad, I said, I'm never, ever, ever going to come back again to uni, not my thing. I didn't like studying. I didn't like, it just wasn't my environment. And then, 5 years later, whatever it might have been, there I was back again, enrolled in a master's. Would never have believed it. Would never have believed that a couple of years after that, I'd be actually back teaching into a master's as well. I think one of the really important things for me when I think about kind of how we teach and what we do with the Garage Project subject and the entirety of the MOE or the Masters of Entrepreneurship program, for me, it's about thinking back to when I was a student and thinking, what are those classes that I just hated? Why did I hate them? And what are those ones that I really loved and what made them so great? And 9 times out of 10 in my head, it comes back to those that could inspire. And I think the teachers that could get you excited about what you were doing. Every time I got excited about what I was doing, I always did well. And every time a teacher couldn't get me excited, I always struggled. So for what we do at the MOE, it's really important about getting people inspired, getting them out there, getting them trying things in an environment that gets them out of their comfort zone, but still keeps them a little bit comfortable. So they're not going to kind of have a really negative or stressful experience going through that as well. So I think kind of having been through that experience and sat on the other side, it's a great way of kind of building empathy, as Laxmi said before, and really building that strong rapport with the students and giving them great examples where people might just be a step or two ahead of them. I think that's really reflective of what we do with the research teams is we can look at these great examples of Cochlear, of Wi-Fi, of all these great Australian innovations that are absolutely doing phenomenal things. But it's really hard for someone to kind of visualize themselves going from kind of where they see themselves here and kind of these great opportunities that have kind of been historically come and gone. So it's really important as well that we can kind of link that network and bring those people who might just be a couple of years ahead into that equation and just help people visualize, okay, I might not see how I might be Cochlear in 10 years time, but I can see how I might be one of those great researchers that have been through the program 2 or 3 years ago. And likewise with the MOE students, it's so great to have that environment and network where we can bring people together to kind of really connect them. Having a foot in kind of both of those camps as well, both the TRAM and the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre, as well as kind of working with Wade and working really closely with Wade and some of their other programs, is also great because it means that I'm in a great position to be able to connect those dots and connect some of those students with opportunities within our teams. And I think that's also really, really exciting as well. The other big part of what we do is so much, both myself and Laxmi, is mentoring a lot of the teams that we have going through the program. And that's not about being the expert on any of those topics. And this is one of the things that baffles me every time we get a cohort of people coming in, is I have to learn 10 entirely different subjects from quantum computing through to finance, through to whatever the researchers might be working on. I get this great deep dive into all these fascinating topics, but the mentoring often is less about knowing or being the expert. It's about kind of helping them to realize things that they think they already know, and giving them kind of confidence in the decisions they're making, connecting them with people, and really kind of helping them apply what they've done, apply the insights they've developed, and bring that back to kind of first principles into the frameworks that we use and the frameworks that we teach, and keep them on track. Sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, and that mentoring role is so important in helping people kind of stay focused on what's important and leaving some of those other things by the wayside. But it's one of the great things that I got a lot of opportunities to kind of practice through being a part of the faculty within the Masters.
Brilliant. Yeah, so this has been really great. Before we move over to questions from the audience, I would love to know, and I'm sure you've covered this in all of your answers so far, but what exactly is it about startups and research impacts that gets you ticking? So why do you love what you do? Why are you so excited about this space? And what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Do you want to start us off, Laxmi?
Sure. I think the reason why I'm here is just to be able to see the ideas and things that people have in their mind could be game changing, thinking about Facebook or Airbnb, and all of these ideas was in someone's mind, and now look at the way we live. So just being able to be part of that and to support it and to see newer ideas coming, that's what gets me out of bed. And like I said, being curious about people and curious about things that they do.
I think for me, one of the really important things that we always speak about in the innovation or entrepreneurship space is kind of find a problem and fall in love with that problem and solve that problem really well. And I think for me, in the position that I'm in and being able to work with all these great teams is I can apply my time, my energy, my effort into solving one problem and do that well. Or I'm really fortunate enough that I can actually spend my time working with lots of different teams and have almost like a ripple effect. So rather than solving one problem, I can work with people and help them solve lots of, tens and hundreds of problems, which is really, really exciting. And I think I love that element to coming in. It's almost like a bit of a force multiplier, which is kind of really cool. I also just love working with the really kind of genius and smart and just tenacious people that we get to work with through the TRAM program, so solving some absolutely wicked, crazy problems and doing it in such an innovative way. Like some of the things they come up with are absolutely kind of phenomenal and groundbreaking. So absolutely love that. Every day is different. Every team is different. Every team has its unique pros, problems, difficulties, hurdles, and we get to kind of go on that journey as a bit of an adoptive team member and ride those highs. We also get to ride the lows, and we're there for them and support them through that as well. But we certainly get to celebrate their victories and really, pat them on the back for a job well done, because they're doing all the hard work. We just get to help them and make life as easy as we can for them.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I can definitely tell that you both absolutely love what you do. So yeah, thanks for sharing all of that so far. So just for the last part of the session, if anybody does have any questions for Andrew or Laxmi, please, we are a bit of a more intimate group today. So if you want to just pop your hand up, I'll get to you and you can read out your question. Or if you just want to pop it in the chat, then I'm also very happy to read it out for you. So just while we're waiting for any questions to come through, I might just jump in with just one more for you guys. So what's your advice for budding founders or researchers out there that are kicking around an idea at the moment?
I'll start off. I think for this one, the biggest thing is that everyone is so scared of sharing their idea, because what if someone steals it? And we look at kind of, great companies. Google didn't invent internet search. Facebook didn't invent social media. They just saw it and saw problems with the way it was being done and kind of solved them from that perspective and solve something new. So the idea itself, in most cases, the idea itself is worth nothing. The hard part is finding a team who can solve that problem, finding a team who loves that problem, finding the support, money, all those different elements. That's where kind of the real value is created. The idea, and if you speak to any founder of a successful startup, the idea that they started with versus the idea that kind of ended up being the successful thing will be night and day in difference. So don't be afraid to speak to people. Just say, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. This is what I'm thinking. Does this resonate with you? Are you excited by that? And absolutely, if you don't go out and speak to people, you'll never start to build a team of people equally in love with solving that problem with you. And if you can't build a team of great people around you, it'll be very difficult to solve that problem and have a successful startup.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Laxmi?
I think as completely agree with what Andrew mentioned, is to focus on solving the hard things. When I say solving the hard thing, I don't mean like solving complex problems only as a startup. What I meant was solving complex problems in your startup. So, we see a lot of startups focusing around branding and focusing around, especially if you're early on in your journey, focusing around branding or team building and, culture and all of that. No, focus on surviving, focus on getting that customer, focus on validating your riskiest assumption that you have about your business that could break your business. So solve the hard thing in your business, solve the things that can't be scaled. Once you get to the crux of that, everything else, branding and positioning and doing all of those things will come naturally as well. But yeah, just work on surviving, making your company survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answers. Yeah, thanks for that. We've had a question come through from Bonnie. She says, Laxmi and Andrew, do you have a favorite startup or team that you've worked with and maybe even were tempted to join? Yeah, very exciting. And these founders that we work are all amazing and are like really, really smart people that, I get tempted to work with them as well all the time. But I think for me, like as Andrew mentioned, is like, how can I make the most impact? Can I make the most impact by joining one company, or can I make the most impact by helping like
hundreds of companies. And so I defer to like sort of being like on the second one in there. I mean, I did have one of the company that I am very good friends with as well. So they were in blockchain technology for renewable energy, something that I've been quite passionate about, social impact and so on. So I was kind of on the verge, like maybe it is, time to join in. But at the same time, again, going back to my thesis, like where can I learn the most and where can I make the impact most? I think that might change in the next 3 years or 2 years or whenever that happens. But for now, I think I'm really happy helping many more startups.
I think it's a very diplomatic answer, Laxmi. Not wanting to play favorite with all your, I feel like often it's like a mother hen moment where you've got all your little kind of chicks growing up and doing great things. Conversely, I'm going to pick two because I'm not quite as diplomatic as Laxmi. Two I think stand out in my head because I think they're absolute game changers for what they do. The first was a team that we're working with called Tiny Bright Things, and they developed a little widget. It's not much bigger than a headphone case, and it goes under a microscope, and it turns a microscope that we all would have used in high school science class into a nanoscope, so we can see things down to the nano level. And that is so cool and mind-blowing, and so many things about it shouldn't be physically possible, but they've figured out a way of doing it. But why I love it, not because it's cool or it's geeky, but because we don't even know how it's going to be used yet. And that's what's really cool. Like this could be used for everything from water testing in remote, areas, or sanitation, or faster drug discovery, or who knows? The possibilities are absolutely limitless. So I think that's really exciting. The other one that I really, really love was the first team that we had that came out of the education faculty, and that was Next Level Collaboration. And they've developed a research-backed program assisting primarily students on the autism spectrum, helping them kind of to develop their collaboration skills, social skills, and kind of great skills that we, all need in the workplace or in life, and making sure that, every student and every young person has an equal opportunity there, which is really, really exciting. On a side note, for them, it's the first university-linked startup to be led by a neurodiverse female CEO, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think what's so great about those two different companies is one will do something that will impact, millions and billions of people around the world in a very small way. But the other one, for a small number of people, it will make such a huge, huge impact in their lives. And I kind of love that, two ends of the spectrum there, which is absolutely fantastic. Have I been tempted to jump in with some of them? Oh, there's probably been a couple that I thought, brilliant, I can really add a lot of value to here. But at the same time, as Laxmi said, we can have the bigger impact by helping more people rather than kind of narrowing our scope of work as well. So I'll pop their websites in the chat if anyone wants to check them out. But yeah, some really exciting teams doing lots of different things.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love hearing about what all the different unique and diverse teams are doing. Yeah, great stuff. I've had a message sent through directly. So where do you both see the MEC and TRAM programs evolving over the next few years? How do you see it growing or changing? Who wants to take that one first?
And
do you want to start us off? Okay, I'll go. Yeah, great one. I think the thing for me and where I see TRAM specifically evolving in the time going forward is we had 220 researchers go through our bootcamp program this year. That's really early stage, really kind of, this is who's who in the zoo. These are the people that can help you, and some different things to kind of think about and support your research journey. But if you think about the number of researchers that we have there, starting their PhD or early career researchers that are involved at the university, and the new ones that come each year, like that is still just such a drop in the ocean. And yeah, that number 220 has kind of doubled from last year and doubled from the year before. We've seen such great growth and a thirst for knowledge in this area, but it's still, there is so much more to do. And I think the ultimate outcome for what we do at TRAM isn't so much about the kind of direct helping of those individual teams, but it really is about developing and changing that culture across the university, so that taking your research and going and building a company or going and doing something really impactful with it isn't an exception, but it becomes the norm. And I think that's really important, that we can start to see, participating in programs like this is expected, is the norm. It's part of your PhD induction process. And I think that's where, when we can have this as the base level, then, it's a really exciting future that we have going ahead. Because you look at countries like Israel, like the US, where these sorts of things are expected. And in fact, if you're a professor and you don't have a side hustle with your research, then you're kind of looked down upon. So I think it's important that we can start to build that culture here as well, and really, the impact and great things that can come from it. It's an exciting potential for us all to have.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. In terms of MAP, if we look at it in terms of the startup landscape as a whole, right? So we are seeing more and more of incubators and accelerators and even venture funds. Like, literally there is about every day there is an angel investment syndicate group or a venture firm that's been created here or globally as well. So we're seeing many people actually interested in investing in startups or supporting startups or working with startups. It's become almost like a big culture change in this decade. But on the other side of it, there's going to be a shortage of talents. There's going to be shortage of talent for, talent who are going to create these businesses. And the second thing is going to be talent who are going to work in these businesses. So I think there's a strong, I would say, a strong requirement for us to start building those pipeline of talents that are going to build those amazing businesses. So what is the kind of world that we like to see, and how is that going to be created? So, and that starts with not when people have already, had a business idea on their mind. That starts with actually getting people to think about, starting something, even when they are early on in their careers, early on in maybe their first year at the university. They might already be starting to think about, maybe I can, go and work in a startup, or maybe I can start creating my own venture 5 years down the line. So creating those opportunities to collaborate within the students or within students plus founders, that kind of initiatives, I think will be really important for MAP to facilitate that kind of engagement, because gone are those days when when the VCs would just be sitting over there for founders to reach out to them. Now the VCs are actually working backwards, which is reaching out to these talent, even though they may not have an idea. It's like, how do we get them to collaborate, to come up with ideas together? So I think we have a really exciting space for mapping that space in facilitating those kind of initiatives. Apart from that, we'll continue to support founders, and not just founders that are affiliated with the University of Melbourne, but that are working on like really complex societal and environmental issues. In fact, our social impact stream, I think it's the only accelerator, university-based accelerator that does not take equity on these startups, and they do not need to be affiliated with the University of Melbourne to get grant. So I would highly recommend, especially if you're working on a social impact space, or you're working on solving some societal or environmental issues or health issues, then you can apply to the MAP program without being affiliated. So I think our strong focus on trying to help businesses that have a big mission and impact will still remain.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. I think I've just got time for one more question. I've had one come through to me. So do either of you have a favorite startup? Maybe not one that you have necessarily worked with, but one that you find really cool or interesting? Put you on the spot there.
Oh, you go ahead, Laxmi.
I actually don't have a favorite startup. But I have, I would say, just rather than a favorite startup, I would say favorite founders. I think, and I wouldn't say I have a favorite founder, but I have many of the founders that have gone on to really inspire me. There are big names like, Elon Musk and other people like, Steve Jobs and whatnot they do, but they are also like our day-to-day founders that, when you just have a chat with them, it's so inspiring of what they're trying to do, but also the background that they bring in and so on. So every day I get inspired. So I would say there are many founders that, inspire me, and the whole purpose around building this non-for-profit around founder stories is to bring those kind of stories that will mean that you just don't have to look up to like Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey or other people to see them as heroes. You can actually see everyday heroes in startup space.
Yeah, tough question. I don't know if I have a specific favorite, but I think kind of in a similar vein to what Laxmi said, I think I really admire the story of Thank You, which started out as kind of Thank You Water and kind of expanded their brand of things that they do. And not because of the great impact they have, but I think with just the pure honesty and transparency in which they operate, I think that's a kind of really great model to look at in how they do things. They've just completely change their business model and how they operate to increase that transparency. And I think that builds such great trust. And I think that's such an important thing for a startup and company to be able to build is trust with the people that they're working with, trust with the community that they build around it. And I think it's a really good example of someone that has, developed a really devout following of customers because they see the story, they, identify and kind of opt in to be a part of this community and this group of people trying to have great impact with their kind of everyday small little actions, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks guys. I think it's time to wrap it up now. We're just right on time. So thank you all so much for coming today, and a huge thank you to Laxmi and Andrew. It's been really fantastic learning more about you and your journeys. If you are keen to come to our next fireside chat, that's taking place on Tuesday the 31st of May, our very own Andrew Rowse will be interviewing Nick Kay, who is the new director of the Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship. So I'll share the details for that via email later, along with the recording of today's session. To stay in touch, sign up to, oh my gosh, I can't speak. So to stay in touch, sign up to our newsletters and follow MEC and TRAM on social media, and make sure that you check out a heap of our upcoming events in person, including some very exciting ones for Melbourne Knowledge Week happening in May at Melbourne Connect. So yeah, with that, I'll say bye for now. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.